Virginia Giuffre will forever be known as a hero for speaking out publicly about Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes. Now, in her posthumously released memoir, Nobody's Girl, she finally gets to tell her story from the beginning in her own words. I spoke with Virginia's brother Danny, or as he calls her, Jenna, along with his wife Lynette, about the book's release. Danny and Lynette, obviously, Virginia's memoir has created a lot of headlines, has been the focus of the news. And I think people have been so disturbed and moved by what she's written. I'm curious to hear your reactions when you first read the book. Danny, why don't you start?
So I'm having a hard time reading this book. I've read it on and off and stopped and started. Um, and I've kind of come to the realization I don't think this book was written for me as a sibling. I think this book was written for people that have suffered from sexual and domestic violence. Um, it's a really hard read. I know her story. I've been there every step of the way. We've talked on all of the points that are in there, but hearing the details, the small details with her family abuse, um, was very hard for me to read.
I'm sure. What about you, Lynette?
Yeah, I've actually read it a couple of times. We actually were able to look at it was an older manuscript, so it wasn't exact. Um, it's is we have I have a lot of mixed feelings reading it. It was really heartbreaking to read, but it's such a beautiful it's a beautiful account of who she really was. I feel like when she was on the news, we would see her in interviews. She was so collected and so strong and such a warrior for justice. And you didn't see Virginia, Jenna to us. And this book, reading it, and it made it harder even to read it was so beautiful and so it was so much her voice. It felt like having a conversation with her. And we did know much of what was already in the book. She never went through Who Wants to Tell Their Big Brothers or brothers at all, the graphic details. So that was especially hard. I think we had conversations where I said, look, I will go through it and we'll cover up those parts just so you don't need to see that if it makes it easier because it's such an important story. And I think her mission for the book was so important and it wasn't about the sensationalism and everything that's going on politically. I think she would have been so involved, but I don't think that's what this book was meant to be in any way. The book was meant to be a resource for survivors. If she could help one survivor, that's what she was setting out to do.
In fact, that's how she ended the book,
Yeah.
Lynette, saying
Yep.
that if she could save one person. Danny, I wonder if you could take a moment and explain your relationship with Virginia in terms of being her half brother.
Um, I've never looked at it like half brother. I've known her whole entire life. We grew up in the same house. We're
You all have different fathers, though, right?
Yeah, same mother, different fathers.
But you were what, a year old?
I was a year old um, when my mom married uh, Sky.
Were there
So,
things in the book, Danny, that you didn't know about when you read it?
there was stuff in the book that I didn't know about until my sister moved to Florida from Australia. And that's when she gave us the details. And it was driven by, I have a daughter. Um, she's 17 now. Then she was a little girl, and she, I could tell she didn't want to say anything to us, to keep us from that, to protect us, and that was in her nature. But once she put her arms around my little girl, She made it very clear what had happened to her.
Because as you know, Danny and Lynette, Virginia writes in great detail about her childhood abuse by her father and his friend. And I'm curious if that was new information for you or when you learned about that, because I know that you grew up in the same house, but you weren't really aware of what was happening, were you?
No, no. I learned later on what year was that when she.
She moved, I think it was 2013 when she moved from Australia. She had not told us about, she may have told us previously about the family friend. Um, she had not said anything about their father. She was very much, she wanted to protect, he was looked at like a hero, by the boys, and that was her word. She wanted to protect them, and she didn't want to ruin their hero. Um, but like Danny said, we had a 5-year-old at the time, little girl, and that triggered something in her to come forward because she needed to protect her niece. And Sky and his wife were pregnant with a little girl, and she needed to make sure that this wasn't going to continue. So she needed them to know. And we're so thankful that it had to have been terrible to discuss those things, but the bravery she had to say, "Look, I'm gonna stop this here."
And you mentioned Sky, and that's your brother, Danny,
Yes.
and also the name of Virginia's father and your stepfather, right? I'm trying to get all the family relations accurate.
Yes. Yeah, he's not a junior. But yeah, they share a first name. Uh, One of the things that I would like to also say is, you know, that's the person that did all those atrocities. He raised me pretty well. He was a coach and he was the dad that I didn't have. And learning these things later on, it and I don't know if she felt the same way. I was thankful for all those things, but now it belongs to me, opening up doors for people and being polite and being a good person. Those are all things that were taught to us in our childhood. But now all of those good things from that monster belong to me, the good things.
I'm curious, Danny, was it really hard when you first learned that this person had abused Virginia so seriously to square the person you knew as a dad with this, as you call him, monster who abused this little girl, what, starting at when she was what, 7 years old?
Yeah. I um I just look at it like this. Um, I'm a father first. My feelings at that point in time, I was taken back and I never doubted her. When the conviction that she had when she told me it was done out of love and out of, raising awareness
And
and
protecting.
protection. And that was kind of my sister's MO throughout her entire life. She was very selfless. Um, Somebody who could go through that from such a young age and still have the capacity to love her family and her friends and strangers. She, even up to the end of her life, was trying to help her friends. Um, and me there in Australia, I was like, you got to put yourself first for once. We got a lot of work to do, put them aside. But, I just want to make sure that, as far as our family, like growing up, I wish, me being the oldest in the house, I wish that I I caught wind of those things. I feel like even at a young age, I'm the type of person that would have raised awareness and done something about it. And there is a lot of guilt. You see little things, and because you love that person, you don't you're blinded by it. You don't see it, you know. And it was a great service to me and my family and my daughter. And she's 17 years old, and she knows who her aunt is. She knows what she did for her, and that's important. And that's part of my sister's legacy.
Danny, how did it change your relationship with this man who raised you, Virginia's biological dad, after you learned this information about what he had done to your sister, your half sister, but your sister, as you said?
There's was immediately a complete disconnect. I made the choice, in my head, I think I thought about, can I have a relationship with this person? And the thing that really bothered me was my sister, being the person that she is, was trying to have a relationship with him, even though all those horrible things had happened. And she was trying to push that on me. She said, I want you to try for me. And I said, no, I have to draw the line. I immediately severed ties with him. And that's hard because up to that point, that was my whole life.
So how old were you, Danny, when the relationship with him ended?
I'm going to have to math here. Hold on. Help.
Well, it was probably 17 minus 5, so it was 12 years ago,
Yes.
I guess,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my 30s.
I'm curious for both of you, uh, when you learned about the abuse that Jenna, as you called her, had to endure at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and so many others. Um, when did that, when did you learn about that and the extent of it? And what was your reaction?
We learned about it pretty early on.
After she escaped to Australia, I don't think she got into the details, the extent, um, the scope of it all. But she did tell us what was going on with Ghislaine and with Jeffrey Epstein, when she moved away to Australia.
When she
Um,
was how old? That was,
19, I think she was when she they sent her to Thailand, um, and she escaped.
I mean, it was so horrifying to read about what they did to her. When she told you, I'm sure you were horrified too. Were you surprised it didn't come to light earlier than it did?
Absolutely. I think even, as Danny mentioned, guilt from childhood. I think as we were young, we were in our 20s, I guess during the time that she was being abused by him. And as the older sibling, I was newer. We were in a newer relationship. But we saw her and we knew, she talks about it in the book how she was trying to find worth and trying to make people proud. And she did, have this story of, I'm going to be a masseuse. And it did seem strange why a grown man would want to employ a 16-year-old. And as a 24, 25-year-old, that did raise flags. And so I think as a woman, I deal with guilt for why didn't I push harder, see more, push to understand. It is something that I did have the opportunity to talk to Jenna about when she did move to Florida, and she said, in my case, these people are so powerful that it probably wouldn't have done any good. But I think that's such a huge um, failing of her because of so many people that were even in his orbit peripherally, that were in and out, whatever it was, a party or just saw him, had to have seen these young girls. You look at the picture of her on the yacht at the birthday party, and she is a child. It's very obvious. She looks like a child. So I just think if more people would have had the courage or the wherewithal to say, hey, let's ring some bells, let's raise some flags, maybe some of these younger survivors would not have gone through that. I mean, it was 1996 when Maria Farmer came forward and, spoke about her teenage sister, and nothing happened from that time. And how many women now, children then, could have been spared? It,
Why,
it's
why do
frightening
you
to.
think, yeah, I was going to ask Lynette and Danny, why do you think it took so long for this story to come to light? Do you think it was that these were extremely powerful, intimidating, scary, threatening people who were a part of this?
I think it was kind of a sign of the times. It was, I don't want to say socially acceptable, but when people in those circles that weren't connected to those atrocities saw that, I think a lot of people just said, nope, I'm not going there, turn around and walk away.
I do think society was a lot different. This was before Me Too, when Virginia was being abused. And we've had television shows about, older men with a harem of very young looking women, and that's been put culturally as acceptable for so long until finally the tides were starting to turn, and women started to feel stronger to come forward. And I know that Virginia was such a huge part of that. And we know this because people have reached out to the family, her survivor sisters, as they call themselves, reached out to the family, other survivors of different types of abuse not connected with Epstein have reached out and said, your sister gave me the courage to do this. And it's on one hand so wonderful to hear, but I think on another, it's so heartbreaking because she's not here now. And she spoke it to her survivor sisters, but how far it reached, she's not here to hear that. She's not here to hear those stories, and that's all she wanted.
Danny, I know it was your stepfather, the man who abused her when she was a little girl, who suggested she get a job at Mar-a-Lago in the spa there. And that is what, opened up this opportunity, if you will, or this horrific experience with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you think he understood the kind of danger she would be in?
I think he understood that, looking back now, she was just a chess piece in his, scheme.
What do you mean by that, Danny?
I feel like I have a daughter, 17-year-old daughter sitting in the other room. She's doing some online school because we're traveling. And in a million years, I would never put her into a position to where she's working in a spa underage around millionaires and billionaires. Just because that's number one, it's not your world. Number two, it's inappropriate. So do I think that he had other motives? I do.
What were those, though?
My sister was an object to him. To do the things that he did to her from a young age up until that point, you know, it objectified my sister and put her into that scenario. And you know,
Changed the way she was able to view herself
yeah,
completely.
Well, that was probably her definition of worth at that point, even as horrific as the treatment was. I read portions of this book and I thought this poor girl didn't have a fighting chance,
no.
No.
given the way she was raised and the abuse she endured.
And she was searching, I mean, she does mention it in the book. She was searching for that approval, that pride, and she did something good. And when you're broken down from a baby, 7 years old, when your self-confidence is broken down and then rebuilt to tie to your sexuality, how do you defend yourself from a predator like Jeffrey Epstein and the many other men that she was handed off to? How do you reconcile that with yourself?
Plus,
It,
this was, as you mentioned, I think, Danny, I mean, this, or maybe you were saying it, Lynette, this was a whole world that was so foreign to her. And that must have been so disorienting for her uh, to suddenly be in this environment.
and I think that was part of, I think especially, and she does, as she refers to Ghislaine as the apex predator, I think that was part of it. I think that they were so good at picking out vulnerable girls, little girls, um, and capitalizing on the things that they saw that they wanted, whether, like with Virginia, they saw her reading a massage book. She really thought, look, I'm going to work in this spa and maybe I can improve myself. Maybe I can find a way out and do something good with my life. And they preyed upon that and they used that. Oh, we're going to train you to be a masseuse. And, whether it was that or with another survivor and it was dancing or art, they were very, very good at identifying those vulnerabilities or those needs in these children and then twisting it. And how do you get out of that when you're that age, when you're surrounded by incredibly powerful people in these places? And you look at, and there's celebrities or politicians or important people, and the money is surrounding you. That is probably something you can't even fathom. They grew up very humbly. So, how do you, as a 16, 17-year-old little girl, even come to terms with that?
What about your mom, Danny? Can you talk about sort of her role in all of this?
I so I kind of look at my mother during that time, and I've had questions in my adult life to her, like, how could you not see this? Um, I don't think it was physical abuse, but my ex-stepfather was a master manipulator. He, for example, like I remember being a kid and going to like car dealerships with him, and he would see like the best truck on the lot, and he would talk him down to the lowest truck on the lot. And growing up, I'm like, man, if we're gonna go to the dealership, we definitely have to bring dad. He just had a way of making people bend to his will. And I think that she was, a big part of that. I know that my mother had abuse in her early life as well. And I think that, but I do know that if she was privy to the severity of what was going on, it probably wouldn't have been a good thing. Um, she has a lot of guilt, and they worked very hard. And I know the book portrays that, but I think it's important to say it out loud. Um, they had a wonderful relationship to the point now where every day at a certain time, my mom sits at the same table and looks at the clock, and that phone call's not coming. They talked every day. And I feel for my mom. I couldn't put myself in those shoes because it's never happened to me, but I'm a father. If I lost my daughter, that would be the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it is the worst thing that's ever happened to her. Um, I think she's in a healing state right now. Um, as a family, we've gone through 36 stages of grief, but we're on like number 30, and she's still back at 5. So she's, coming to terms with the loss that that person's never going to be there again. And she is proud of her, but I think it just keeps circling back to she's gone.
There are a number of unnamed characters, as you all know, having read the book, like billionaire number one. Why do you think she decided in this book, where she bears her soul and it's so painful to read, she decided not to name names?
I think there's two reasons. I think she actually states it in the book that first and foremost is her children. There is nothing that they joked that there was a hierarchy in her life where it was her children, her pets, and then her brothers. Her children, that was the single most important thing she'd ever done in her life, period. And end all. And I think that, and she says it, these people are so powerful that I'm not willing to put my family at risk, number one. And I think the second part is you know, this call for the survivors to list names, I don't think is very fair because they have done that. They've gone to the authorities and they've done their part. They listed the names in the place that they were supposed to. They've turned over the information, they've given the sworn testimony, they've done their part. And we failed them as a society because nothing really has happened save for Epstein and Maxwell. So I don't think that that was her intent in this book. I mean, I know it wasn't her intent in this book. She absolutely wants to hold everyone accountable. She wants to make the world a safer place going forward. But this book was meant to be something that someone could pick up and either A, they've gone through abuse and they can see in her story, they can walk that journey with her, they can feel that building of strength and know that it is possible and it's okay to come forward and it's also okay to feel vulnerable and broken. That's perfectly acceptable and that you shouldn't feel shame. I think she wanted it to be a handbook to say, this is what I've gone through. If you've gone through something similar, know you can come out on the other side. And I'm going to be here standing with you, holding your hand. Because that's who she was. That's what she wanted more than anything. She has a nonprofit, her store. That's what she wanted to do with it. She wanted to help other survivors. She wanted to change legislation around statutes of limitations, so that you can come forward and not be afraid, not be shamed, not be re-victimized by going through that process of coming forward. So I don't think, as far as people asking for names, and we joke because I say don't read the comments when you see things. Be careful with that. And then I go and I do it, even though I tell him not to. But it's upsetting to see, oh, well, she didn't name the names, but she did. She has. She named the names to the authorities, and that's not what this book is about. It's a human story, and anybody that picks it up and reads it can tell that this is a story of a woman that says, I went through so much. My whole life was a nightmare, but I still have love to give. I still have empathy. I still have care, and I want to do my part. I just think that that's got to be the message around the book. The Epstein files, I think that's a sidebar. And if she were still with us, I 100% know she would be the loudest voice in the room and calling for that transparency. I don't think that's what this book was about.
That raises two issues. One is, how frustrating is it for you, and would it have been for Jenna slash Virginia that this information has not been released, that the files have not been made public, because I know she believed up until her death that they would be.
Yeah.
And I think all of the survivors share that. We've been in contact with many women that were in her same shoes, all different periods of time, and they are frustrated, but the fire is set. Um, they're screaming from the mountaintops, and a lot of them are screaming from the mountaintops because my sister did that, and they miss her and wish she was part of the fight, but now they know that they have a voice. And that was a big thing for our family. You know, we're not we're not these people that know all about advocacy and stuff. We just want to do right by her. What would she have wanted? I don't think in her life she wanted us anywhere close to Epstein files and princes and abuse. She wanted to push us away from that and hide that because that's who she was. But she's not here anymore.
I don't
And
think hide that, but I think protect us.
yeah, yeah,
She was transparent with us, but she didn't want to involve us in the
She didn't
ugly
want
part
to
of it.
drag you into it, if you will,
right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I think she would be so proud of the family, and coming forward for survivors. And I think that it's a such a mutual thing where, you know, coming forward and speaking out, it helps the grief because you have to keep saying her name. She was a hero. So, let's keep her name out there because it's true. It's who she was, and we're absolutely not okay with letting her name go by the wayside, especially when all of this is happening in the world and she would have been front and center. But at the same time, we're going to stand and say we support you to all of the survivors, the support that they give back and the healing that they give back to the family just by being able to share stories of that part of Jenna's life. It's immeasurable, really.
Danny and Lynette, I'm curious, why do you think the files haven't been released? I'm sure you've thought about it. I'm sure you've speculated. Uh, what do you come up with when you try to figure this out?
It's a really good question. Um, I think there's of course many names in there of very prominent people, and this isn't just a thing that's in the United States, it's global. Um, and I just think at that level of power that, you know, and I think too, if those names were released, I think it would show a failure on our part as a society. Um,
Yeah, I think it would highlight I mean, it's been 20 plus years um, since the original investigations. I think it would really highlight how vast this network, this child sex trafficking network was. Um, I, I can't speak to why it's not being released other than there's got it's the excuses have run out, when you cite survivors as an excuse and then survivors come and stand on the Capitol steps, you have to throw that excuse out the window now. That it's These women have been failed for 20 years. Do we really know why? It has to be in what they've told the authorities. There can't be any other reason. Otherwise, why? Why? I think that's the real question. If they can't give us a reason why, it it has to be because of what's in there.
And I think that to your point, they fulfilled uh, Jenna and Virginia slash, I'll call her Jenna because that's how you all knew her. But she and many other survivors fulfilled their obligation by talking to the authorities. I imagine that many of them are really frightened about coming forward because of how powerful and well connected
They've had very real
These people
threats in
are,
their
right?
lives.
One of the conversations I had with my sister when she was in court for the Jeffrey Epstein, I said, okay, I'm your brother. I'm going to ask you a question. After you put this powerful person away, can you just stop and go back to your life and put it down? You get that win and you walk away. Her answer was no, I'll never stop. I will never stop. And I think that was her power, and I think that was also her curse. She was very stubborn, and she took ownership of charging at those people when nobody else charged at those people. And I know for a fact she received many death threats, picture
Break-ins.
break-ins at her house. I witnessed one when she was living in Florida. We came back from a family trip. Everything in her house was on the floor, and nothing was taken. Jewelry, money, nothing. So, we chalked it up to like either they're A, trying to find dirt on her, or B, they're just trying to scare her. Um, and they used her children. And I think that that's like we were saying earlier, that was her number one. You go at the kids, she backed off. Um,
She
and all
was
of that stuff has been turned to the authorities, and reported, and it is frustrating as the family that nothing has been done yet.
There's been no real accountability. And even releasing the list, um, that's not the end goal. There has to be accountability after it because what happens after? Everyone is very fixated on the list and it's become such a political hot point. And we've been very clear about saying, look, this is not a political party issue. It's not a right versus a left. It's a right versus a wrong. And once hopefully the justice system does the right thing and releases the list, then investigations need to start into what was the actual relationships. And if names are in there from these women now that were girls then those people need to be looked at and there needs to be true investigations opened up.
do you
It
think that
otherwise this perpetuates, and where do we really go as a society?
do you think, sorry to interrupt, Lynette, do you think this will ever happen? Do you think we'll ever see justice for her and all the victims?
I hope so. I mean,
I I
that's her
think
legacy.
I think the momentum has started.
Yeah.
I think, I'm not, she said it earlier. I read the comments. That there's a shift that's happening right now. Um, I think a lot of people just like to push the issue, but I think most people in this country and abroad, they're done being lied to.
They're ready to believe the survivors, I think. And I think seeing her face on posters, on banners projected on a castle, that's huge. We weren't seeing that 20 years ago. We weren't seeing that 10 years ago. And that's Virginia. That's her legacy. She has been working this entire time for that. She's been chipping away bit by bit by bit, doing what she can do. And it may not have always been headline news like it is right now, but she's always been working on it, which is why it's so sad that she can't be here to see what she has done actually making a difference. I do think eventually things are going to come out because they are slowly rolling out. And that's so much in her legacy.
I know that her two sons and her daughter meant the world to her. And she was so strong, it sounds like, until she just didn't have the strength anymore. And can you tell us what you think led to her just giving up and talk about why she's no longer with us, Danny?
I think, and I was there. I saw her in the state that she was in. And I think she also quoted it, um, the domestic abuse that happened in her family. Um, she was embarrassed.
Yeah,
She,
her statement to people, that's exactly what she says, that she fought against these powerful men for so long and she couldn't fight what was happening in her home. And that was like hearing about their father. That was like hearing about Epstein when she called and she was on the other and it was FaceTime and the pictures are public. As a family, as an older brother, sister-in-law, there's no doubt, there's no question that she was hurting, that she had been hurt. So all of that pain she was carrying that was worse to her than all of these powerful strangers.
well, and losing the
And
ability to see her children, I think, and my brother said it when he was there. Um, he said, "I've never seen her that low." And she was begging us while we were there, go to my kids, go to my kids. She had an active um, restraining order against her family. And, as an
It
American,
was a restraining order that her husband had instigated against her that prevented her from seeing her three children, right?
yes.
yeah,
Tony?
she made a police report regarding a domestic violence incident in January, and then he put a restraining order on her, preventing her from seeing her children. And I think that was the most devastating blow. As a mother, you know, I know how I would feel and the love she had for those children. That was the most devastating blow that could happen. I think mentally trying to wrap her head around, you know, reconciling, I can't pick up the phone and call my daughter. I can't go to my son's birthday. Um, and I think that the systems over there, that the court case, everything was very overwhelming and it was very confusing for us. And we hadn't been injured, we weren't sick, we weren't in the hospital, and we were scrambling just trying to figure out the legal system and what was going on and what her next steps needed to be. And it all seems so overwhelming from this side to imagine that as a mother, that's the situation you're in. And how do you reconcile that?
And this was in Australia dealing with her husband, Robbie, and their own situation. And she had told you that she was experiencing domestic violence in that relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there was a earlier precedent from when she was in the States as well, which I think, after the fact she called to have it expunged, but we have the sheriff at that time for that incident reached out to the family to discuss the incident. So when she called in January, because when she reported the domestic violence in Australia was January, there just wasn't any doubt that that's what could have happened. And the photos were published, I think, shortly after she passed away, are frightening, to look at the damage that was done to her face. How do you look at your little sister and say, why are you not allowed to see your children when you're the one that looks like that? It's that's been a really hard thing for us. And I think trying to reach out to the children, like we love these children and we didn't really get to speak to them as much as we would like to, have the close relationship that we would like to. But first and foremost, everything that we've done is because we love Virginia and what we saw in that moment in January, it lit a fire to like this is not okay. You can't you can't let this happen
Have you contacted or do you have any relationship with her children at all?
Tried, reached out to
Yeah.
them.
Um, their father, I think the narrative over there is that we're just the family across the ocean that doesn't care and only showed up for my sister's wealth. And, the truth is we've never taken anything from her. And
Everything that we're doing now, this is not, we don't take any money. Everything has been just to make sure the world knows and remembers her for who she was,
I
and
can't,
that the kids know. I
yeah,
think that's important because, they're teenagers. I have a teenager and she looks at us like, mom and dad, whatever. But her children, I think, need to grasp the magnitude of who she was and what she did because it was amazing. Their mom was amazing. And, I think the more that we speak and get the word out there, we just hopes that they're gonna absorb that. They're young. Um, their mom was amazing. One thing I wanted to bring up is that, her sharing her story and coming forward, it informed the way we raised our own child. Um, how open we were with her about some things, how protective, overprotective she would say we are about other things. She had that impact directly on our life. And now, especially now, that we're hearing from other people and seeing people come out in support of her and seeing what she meant to so many people. We were always proud of her from the beginning. But wow, like it's hard to even comprehend what she meant to the world. You can say, oh, Epstein in jail or Ghislaine in jail. It's hard to comprehend that her legacy could hopefully, what we hope for, one day mean that, the connected and the wealthy, they're not above the law. They're not allowed to be immoral. They have to follow the common decency of the world just like everyone else. And she put herself on the line every time she spoke out for that reason. That's that's incredible, and how proud as her family, the pride we feel. And that's why I think the book, and we were very actually grateful. We went back and forth with the publisher, but grateful that they reached out in the first place, um, to allow us a say. I think that's why it was so important that we get the forward in there and just make sure that her voice really from start to finish was there because the story, it's so impactful. It's so powerful. It's her. I think that's what's so amazing about her is that if you're looking at abuse like that on that level from 7 years old, and then, from the father to the family friend, and then, moving on in what she experienced in her teen years, and she kept pulling herself back together. And I think that's why there was a lot of skepticism after she died. Oh, she couldn't have done it. She wouldn't have done it, even from some of her inner circle, because she was able to do that. She had that inner strength and she had that inner joy. I don't think that we see enough of that. Um, the cheeky, the funny, that ability for her to take all of the nightmare that she went through and put it in a box and say, I'm going to work to do something about this. But in the meantime, I'm going to laugh with my brother on the phone and I'm, going to call him silly names like any sister would do. And we're going to talk about music and we're going to have a real relationship. That's a lot of character and a lot of strength that I don't think most people would have.
I think the kids, I think that was the catalyst that broke her. Um, and I mean, there were days that I was there, she just wouldn't come out of her room, and then other days she would come out and we'd be laughing and carrying on, and she just was in this cycle, that she couldn't escape from, and it was very scary to watch. And I didn't think. that that was the case. I didn't think that she was gonna follow through and do those things, but there was previous attempts and there was talk of it. When I showed up in Australia, she asked me, she said, if my health is so, you know, if I'm so debilitated, would you go to one of these countries that maybe they do like the euthanasia? And I was like, no. I said, Jenna, I said, we're gonna fight. Let's get you better. You have access to the best medicine. You just have to go home to get it. To get a top line surgery, you got to travel across the whole continent of Australia to get it. I told her, I said, there's medicine here, and I think that you should at least attempt to fight before you just throw your hands up and give up.
And there were moments while he was there where she, like he said, they would be laughing, where she really did seem so strong, like we were used to seeing her. I think the last conversation that I had with her, they were having a fun night. She was had a margarita machine and she was making him margaritas and making fun of him. Um, and they FaceTime called and there was joy in her in that moment. But like Danny said, it was her just trying to pull herself together and move forward, I think, for everyone else, which is kind of the story of her life, where everything she did, she was doing for other people. And I just think that she lost that ability to fight for herself. Like he said, it was one event after another of things going wrong, things impeding what needed to happen for her to take the steps to get healthy and to fight.
Last question. How angry do you think she'd be? I know that she died in April, and of course, a lot has happened since then. How angry do you think she would be at the current administration and the current leaders of our government about how this has been handled?
I think she'd be extremely angry. Um, and you know, she was an Australian. She was a United States citizen living abroad. Uh, I don't think she understood our politics anymore and
No,
the
she
way
was only
things work.
19 when she left, so she
Yeah,
never really experienced.
and I think that she would have been mortified at the direction that it's gone. Um, I don't think that, and I don't think she would have been quiet about it for sure. And talking to all of her survivor sisters, they're like, she's here. We're showing up. She's here with us. We can hear her. And we went to DC and stood on the steps there, and everybody was screaming out, "We're ready. We want justice. We want, you know." And I think that she would have been disappointed for sure.
Ultimately, what do you both hope your sisters and your sister-in-law's legacy will be?
Well, I think first and foremost, we want to make sure that her work is continued, um, that it is able to move forward and be a voice, a guiding voice for other survivors. I think that we want to continue to make her face known to the world, um, and make it known what she did. Like I said, it's been really moving to see the response as it's built after she's passed away and the support of her. We wish that it would have been stronger while she was with us. But going forward, I think we want to use that momentum to do what she wanted done, is she wanted change. She wanted to live in a world where what happened to her isn't going to happen to the next vulnerable little girl. And I think if there's anything that we can do to help people that have already gone through this, or provide resources, or rally for change in the government and how things are done, or ask for accountability of those who have been accused, I think that's it. I think we just move forward because that is her legacy. That's what she was all about, was working to make sure what happened to her isn't going to happen to the next little girl. And if we do that, then maybe we've honored her, and that does keep her alive with us. I think the more times you say her name, Virginia Jenna, for us, the more alive and the more with us it feels like she is.
I think too, and this is coming from women that I met when we were in DC that knew her. They said your sister was like the rally commander. We're all separated. We've got some of us over here and some of us over here. She was the person that pulled all those people together. And I think that if we can harness that power, I don't I want solidarity for all these people that have gone through this, because the more people that speak out together, the more impact it has.
Well, this has been such a important conversation. I feel like I know your sister. I feel like I know Jenna and Virginia a lot better than I did when we first said hello. So I really appreciate your time and your honesty. And I'm sure a lot of this is really hard to talk about.
It's important to talk
Yeah.
about, though. We understand that. We understand, and we knew with like her book these questions, so we've had time to kind of absorb that and say, okay, here we go. Um, and if she were here, she would be in the same boat. So I love my sister, and it's important to me to be able to speak on her behalf.
Well, thank you both so, so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.